But also, just in the last week, some documents have been exposed that soon after the Americans arrived in 2001, and early in 2002, in fact, the United States sort of imposed an agreement on the Afghan government, signed by two ministers, the Minister of Interior and Foreign Affairs in Afghanistan, for permanent American presence. The point I'm trying to make is that the U.S. all along wanted to have a permanent presence, and now with the revolts of the Arab masses in the Middle East, the Arab Middle East, I think the United States would be looking for a more friendly, you know, smaller country to maintain its presence, and they think it's going to be Afghanistan. Except, you know, the Afghans simply would not accept foreign occupation.
What we could be looking at here with Afghanistan is something larger than minerals, something larger than resources, although it's a very big part of it, but strategic for the future wars of the world, potentially, with other potential threats that are, starting to build right now. This is very,
well,
very
you know, China,
Pakistan.
if you look at China here, Afghanistan has a border with China. There's something else going on, you know, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a military,
talk a lot about that here,
which is a military sort of economic organization, and it's really sort of the response to NATO. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization started about 10 years ago, as you know. It was just to be a cultural organization, but now they have military maneuvers, they have joined forces, it's just like NATO. So
now, on that topic of just like NATO, they also do exercises, just like the West, where terrorists are the common enemy. And what are we listening to here? Seems like they decided to play this tape that you brought in randomly.
This is Ustad Awalmir. He was the most famous, one of the most famous singers, musicians, and this song in particular is very popular in Afghanistan.
I was
he's talking about the country.
Music when I was young, through my father. I will say that. There were so many things that he listened to around the world that... Yeah, so the national anthem, is it still the same, or have they changed it?
They have changed it. They've changed the wording and everything because...
What has changed in the wording?
Because one thing was that there was a civil war underway in Afghanistan before and when the Americans arrived on October 7, 2001. And that civil war was going on between the Pashtun South, essentially, and the Northern Alliance, the coalition of the minorities, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras, and so forth. So the civil war is going on, the Americans intervene, and they intervene on behalf of the Northern Alliance. And if you go to Afghanistan now, most of the important positions are actually occupied by members of the Northern Alliance. The vice presidents, for example. Karzai is a figurehead himself. He has no power. I mean, he's sort of like a hostage. But most of the important positions in the army, in the intelligence, in the police, in the government, in the embassies are in the hands of the Northern Alliance, because when they moved in, you know, on the back of the tanks and B-2 bombers, they sort of took over, in fact, including homes and property and real estate in Kabul, but also all of the position. So there was a civil war underway, and that civil war is still sort of being fought, except now, instead of the Northern Alliance, the Afghans fighting each other, the foreigners are fighting part of Afghanistan on behalf of another part of Afghanistan. So the Taliban now, and I don't like to call it Taliban actually, because the insurgency now consists of all kinds of people, including the Hazaras, Tajiks, Uzbeks, which is to say that the vast majority of the people, and this was a study done actually by the International Council on Security and Development, which is a Belgium organization, the vast majority of the people now, regardless of their ethnicity, race, and region, want the foreigners out. But the foreigners have their own agenda and they have their own interests, you know, and that is, as we said. So I think Afghanistan in some ways is being penalized for its strategic location, because it's at the hub. It's as you can see it between Central Asia and South Asia, and then here the Middle East, you know, very close to the Arab Middle East and Iran and all that. And so
we have strategic location, we have resources. You know, there's one other thing that also comes to mind quite often. Afghanistan is not really too far away from Iraq. And Iraq happens to be ancient.
No, it's right here. Iraq would be right here.
It's one of its neighbors. Now, it's ancient Babylon. It's this place where supposedly the Old Testament, according to many scholars, that question outside the box of religion, including Islam and Christianity, what really happened? How did we get here? And in Iraq, you know, for example, in 2003, these museums were looted. And some of these things talked about these gods that had basically human slaves underneath them, and they used them to mine gold. These are basically theories about aliens coming to Earth and seeding humanity. Many of them are based in Iraq where these wars are taking place, which are causing many people to question that are in that field of research what really is taking place on Earth. Why is all this taking place in Iraq, this place that links back to the ancient world? I look at Afghanistan, and I see a country where so many people, and maybe you can tell us more about that, have tried to invade. And I keep coming down to it, you know, why is there this fixation and fascination, desire to control this country? And then why have they also never been able to control that? And I'm hoping that luck is still on the side of Afghans, perhaps it's more than luck, and that will carry them out through the future to see through this storm they're in.
Yes, I mean, as you know, Alexander the Great spent 3 years, I think, in Afghanistan, and then the British. You know, there were 3 wars between the Afghans and the British, and then Genghis Khan, Timur-Lenk, all of these people, everyone has tried. But, you know, it's a strange place, even though it's very diverse ethnically, and there are many, many tensions and conflicts amongst the different groups. But when it comes to foreigners, they tend to unite. And so right now, I mean, it's sort of common knowledge that, you know, the United States and NATO essentially have lost the war. That is, say, if you're not really winning against the guerrillas, you're losing. And this last year was the bloodiest after the 10-year war. That is, say, more Americans and more Afghans were killed than any previous year. In fact, May and June in July were the bloodiest months, which is to say, one of the things, the impression you talked about, the troop withdrawal, so-called. One, we must say, you know, that the President Obama, the Nobel Peace Laureate, in fact, has escalated this war. You know, he escalated the war, and he also expanded it to Pakistan, of course, but also these other countries over there. So what is happening now, of course, there's supposed to be a troop withdrawal, but they will go on. You know, this will be until the end of 2014. But at the same time, the air war, the use of helicopters and drones and jet fighters has increased exponentially. That is, and also these night raids. This is one thing that really, really bothers Afghans, and apparently dozens and dozens of these take place all over the country. So while there's an impression created just to appease the American, you know,
in reality, it's a Terminator film on steroids.
Yes. So you would draw a few troops, but non-essential people. But also the other thing that many people here don't know, that at one point, you know, there were 150,000 troops from 46 countries, from New Zealand to Lithuania, from Poland to, you know, to Egypt, waging war on this poor, you know, in very, very underdeveloped country. But the thing is that there are also contractors, about 150,000 civilian contractors, people who might do the laundry or feed the troops or use these drones. And some of these organizations like Blackwater, DynCorp, I think Armored North America, there are many, many of these major security companies with multi-billion-dollar, multi-year contracts in Afghanistan, and those are not even mentioned. So if there's a troop withdrawal, they're being replaced perhaps by civilian contractors, civilian quote-unquote, but also the air war has been intensified.
It has been intensified. On the topic of DynCorp, Cynthia McKinney brought up before Congress when she was confronting Rumsfeld on the issue about the sex trafficking that they had been caught engaged in Africa and elsewhere. I know this stuff is going on in the Middle East. I also notice there's not a lot of coverage of it taking place. They talk about sometimes sexual assaults when it's within the military on military. The stuff pertain to other things that might be going on. There's a lot of secrecy around that and a lot of lack of concern. How much more concern, though, do you think people that are unaware of it might be wanting to look at this issue? The idea that there are people that are disappearing from their homes and we know nothing about what's happened to them.
Well, I was just reading recently about human trafficking in Afghanistan. And also there was one group of one of these security companies. It was Armored something North America. and they were people who actually were protecting the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. And somebody leaked the tape to the press. This security company, which was protecting the U.S. Embassy, was engaged in things that, say, junior high school students would do. Prostitution. But also I know reports by the U.S. State Department, the inspectors and the Government Accountability Office clearly document that some of these civilian contractors who are doing things in Afghanistan actually charge the American taxpayers for prostitutes. Prostitutes from Afghanistan, but also prostitutes from other countries, especially Eastern Europe, China, and Thailand. And so, but there is this human trafficking going on. People do disappear. Boys and girls do disappear. Women do disappear. Whether it's for work, whether it's for fighting, whether it's for prostitution.
On if there's where the market is for this, or do you just see it just being sporadic?
Well, the market, I think, is, I mean, in Afghanistan itself, and I have heard, and I can't really document this, I've heard from Afghans who have worked with these foreign troops or contractors and so forth that they do take advantage of the Afghan women. And this is a country, you know, where more than half the population is unemployed. A country where the majority of the people are poor and live on $1 or $2 a day.
This is why Americans have to think about our own country. As we learn what happened to the third world, I think we need to look very carefully at our own country at times.
Yes, but think about how our money is spent in our trusts, but also think about some of these agencies now. I happen to know the brutality of the Blackwater in particular because the nephew of one of my students was killed. He was one of those people who was just going home from an English class and he happened to be in the wrong place. This was 2 years ago. And he was shot from behind, a young man, Rahib. But anyway, so, but Blackwater, which for example has been implicated, as you know, and actually fined, you know, for what it did in Iraq.
And by the way, this man, Erik Prince, I think there's a bunch of people around him. Look at his name, Erik Prince. What kind of a name is that? He looked too clean, he looked too young, he was too wealthy. He was another front man, and they were talking about how Blackwater has all these company names. Now they just say we can't track them, but they keep giving all these umbrella companies new contracts.
Well, I was just reading, you probably noticed that he is training actually a special commando force for the UAE, the United Arab Emirate. Not from Muslim countries, which is interesting. This was in the news quite a bit about a month and a half ago. He's training a special commando force for the UAE government, none from the Muslim country, because he said Muslims will not fight, shoot Muslims. This is, you know, for the UAE. And I was just reading, you know, that he has moved his headquarters to Washington, D.C. to be closer. But the important thing is that an organization like that, which has a terrible record, and which also has, you know, a record of cheating the U.S. government and the U.S. taxpayers, continue to sign multi-billion-dollar contracts. And also the important thing is that the Afghan police and the Afghan army and the Afghan intelligence people are trained by people like the ones who work for, say, Blackwater or Danco and so forth. And these are the types that they are. As it came out in the court, these are the types that believe that they are on a mission from God, that they are the reincarnated Knights Templar, which became the Freemasons, which became those that created the Great Seal and the dollar bill and founded this glorious, loving, peaceful country. So these people believe that they are of the ideology of the 13th century. And so that's what hopefully people are understanding tonight, that this is more than strategic, this is more than resources. There was a religious,
some sort of a ideology.
Theological ideology, definitely. I mean, I think it's not a surprise, because if the reason was Al-Qaeda, everyone now, Robert Gates, you know, Hillary Clinton, President Obama, Petraeus, everyone is saying that there are no Al-Qaeda. Mike Mullen himself, I heard him say this, that there may be 50 or so Al-Qaeda. Now, you don't need an army, a superpower. You don't need 46 countries to be fighting 50 people. So there must be some other reason. And the Afghan government then and now, they have had nothing to do again with 9/11, and they have nothing against the American public or this country or the American government. And the Afghans have no agenda like the Qaeda, they just want to be left alone, and they just want their country. So you have to ask yourself, you know, what would be the reason why you have to stay there for 10 years, spend $500 billion so far, and continue spending $10 billion a month for an operation on a country and a people that have not harmed you in any way?
Right. You know, these are very good things that we're bringing up tonight, because we need to think about each one of these things independently. And one thing I thought